The taste of salted bread sat heavy on my tongue when he said it. Humans cannot survive the wolf trials. He spat the words like a curse, like a prayer, like something he needed to believe. I kept chewing. The bread was 3 days old and hard at the edges, but I had eaten worse, and I had learned long ago that silence unnerves men more than any scream. My name is Eira, though I have never spoken it aloud. I am 17 winters old, small enough that most mistake me for a child, with black hair that refuses any taming and hands that have learned to say everything my throat cannot. I was born without voice, or perhaps I lost it so early that the difference no longer matters. What I know is this: I came into this world during the longest night of the year, and my mother carried me into the frozen tundra and left me there among the wolves. She walked away. She did not look back. And somehow, impossibly, I survived. The man who spoke was called Torvin, a warrior with shoulders like mountain ridges and a beard braided with bone fragments from his kills. He sat 3 tables away, surrounded by other contestants who had come to prove themselves in the trials, and his voice carried through the stone hall like thunder across an open plain. 42 years old, skin weathered by wind and violence, a scar splitting his chin where something with claws had once disagreed with him. He was speaking to a younger man, barely 20, who trembled slightly as he gripped his cup of mead. I watched them without watching, the way Grandmother Sepha taught me. Let your eyes rest on nothing and see everything. Let your body say you are harmless while your mind counts exits and weapons and the distance between your seat and the nearest door. The hall was crowded with bodies and smoke and the smell of roasting meat. Stone walls rose around us, ancient and cold, carved with images of wolves in various poses of hunting and triumph. This was the sanctuary of the White Fang, the sacred place where the wolf trials had been held for more generations than anyone could count. Tomorrow, those of us who had registered would enter the frozen wilderness beyond these walls. We would face the wolves. Most of us would die. I took another bite of bread. The memory came without warning, the way they always do. I was perhaps 5 years old, sitting in Grandmother Sepha's cabin while snow piled against the single window. She was ancient even then, her eyes clouded white with blindness, her fingers still clever enough to weave baskets by touch alone. She was telling me the story of how she found me. "You were crying," she said, her voice like wind through dead leaves, but not the way babies cry. "You were calling to something, and when I followed the sound, I found you in a circle of paw prints, and the prints led away in every direction, and you were warm. You should have been frozen solid, but you were warm, and there was milk on your lips, and I knew then that the wolves had fed you. I never learned who my mother was." Grandmother Sepha said she saw a figure walking away through the snow, but the blizzard swallowed her before any features could be made clear. A woman who gave birth and then walked into the wilderness to offer her child to the wolves. Some in the village said she was mad. Others said she was performing a ritual, an old one, from before the priests came with their rules and their ceremonies. Others said she was simply desperate, and desperation makes ghosts of us all. What I believe is simpler. She wanted me dead. The wolves disagreed. The priests entered the hall as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, their robes the color of fresh snow, their faces painted with ash in patterns meant to honor the wolf spirits. There were 7 of them, and they moved in formation, and the hall fell silent at their approach. The eldest was a man called Father Halvard, perhaps 60 years old, with a shaved head and eyes so pale they seemed colorless. He walked with a staff carved from a single wolf femur, and when he reached the center of the hall, he struck it against the stone floor 3 times. "Contestants," he said, "tomorrow you enter the sacred grounds. Tomorrow you face the trials. Some of you will return, most will not. This is the way of things. This is the balance we maintain." I had heard these words before, or versions of them. Every winter the priests gathered those foolish or desperate enough to enter the trials, and every winter the wolves thinned the herd. It was supposed to be an honor, a chance for humans to prove they were worthy of sharing this land with the wolf clans. In practice, it was slaughter dressed in ceremony. But I was not here for honor. I was not here to prove anything to the men who looked at me and saw only a mute girl with wild hair and clothes that had been mended too many times. I was here because of the dreams. They started when I was 13. A white wolf, larger than any I had seen in waking life, standing at the edge of a frozen lake. She watched me with eyes the color of winter sky just before dawn, and in the dreams I could feel her inside my chest, a presence as familiar as my own heartbeat. She never attacked. She never fled. She simply watched and waited, and each time I woke I felt the absence of her like a wound that would not heal. Grandmother Sifa said the dreams were messages. She said the wolf was calling me home. She said there were things about my birth that even she did not understand, and that one day I would have to seek the answers in the only place they could be found. The sacred grounds, the heart of wolf territory, the place where the trials take place. So I came. Father Halvard's gaze swept across the hall, pausing briefly on each face. When he reached me, something flickered in those colorless eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or suspicion. I had registered 3 days ago, and since then I had noticed the priests watching me more closely than they watched the others, whispering among themselves when they thought I could not see. I am mute, not blind, and I have learned to read lips as easily as Grandmother Sifa reads the patterns in scattered bones. Abomination, one of them had said. The other had shaken his head and replied, "We will let the wolves decide." I did not know what they meant, but I intended to find out. The night passed slowly in the barracks where contestants slept. I lay on my narrow cot and listened to the breathing of the others, the occasional whimper of someone caught in nightmare, the creak of old wood settling against the cold. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally arrived, she was there. The white wolf stood on a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of frozen tundra. Behind her, the sky burned with the green and violet fire of the northern lights. She was enormous, her shoulder as high as my head, her fur so bright it seemed to glow from within. And her eyes, those pale blue eyes, fixed on me with an intensity that made my chest ache. She opened her mouth. No sound emerged, but I understood her anyway, the way you understand things in dreams, through feeling rather than words. She was saying my name, not Eira, the name Grandmother Sifa gave me. Something older, something that had been mine before I had words to claim it. I woke with tears freezing on my cheeks and dawn light creeping through the cracks in the walls. The trials began at midday. We gathered at the northern gate of the sanctuary, 43 contestants in total, our breath forming clouds in the bitter air. The priests stood in a line before us, and beyond them stretched the wilderness, endless white broken only by the dark spears of pine trees in the distance. Somewhere out there, the wolves waited. Somewhere out there, the truth about my birth waited too. Father Halvard raised his staff. "The rules are simple," he said. "You will enter the sacred grounds. You will survive for 3 days and 3 nights. The wolves will hunt you. If you kill a wolf, you fail. If you flee beyond the boundaries, you fail. If you are still alive when the sun rises on the 4th day, you have passed." He paused, and his pale eyes found me in the crowd. "May the wolf spirits judge you fairly." The gates opened. We walked through. I separated from the group almost immediately. Most of the contestants were forming alliances, clustering together in the belief that numbers would protect them. They were wrong. The wolves of the sacred grounds were not ordinary wolves. They were larger, smarter, and according to legend, they could sense fear the way a hunter senses blood. Staying with a group of terrified humans would only draw them faster. Instead, I moved alone into the trees, my footsteps light on the crusted snow, my body wrapped in layers of fur and wool that Grandmother Sifa had prepared for me before I left. She had not tried to stop me. She knew, as I did, that this journey was inevitable, that it had been waiting for me since the night I was born. "Be careful," she had said, pressing her weathered hands to my cheeks. Her blind eyes had stared through me and beyond me, seeing something I could not see. "And remember, whatever you find out there, you are still my granddaughter. You are still Eira." The first day passed without incident. I found a shallow cave beneath a rocky outcropping and made a small fire, shielding the light with my body so it would not be visible from a distance. I ate dried meat from my pack and listened to the sounds of the wilderness, the wind, the distant call of birds, the occasional crack of a branch breaking under the weight of accumulated snow. No wolves, not yet, but I felt them, or rather, I felt her. The white wolf. She was out there, somewhere beyond my sight, watching me with those pale blue eyes, waiting for something. I did not know what. On the second day, I found the first body. He was the young man Torvin had been speaking to in the hall, the one who had been trembling. Now he lay sprawled across a frozen stream, his throat torn open, his eyes staring at the white sky above. The blood around him had frozen into dark crystals that glittered in the weak sunlight. He could not have been dead for more than a few hours. I knelt beside him and closed his eyes. I did not know his name. I did not know anything about him except that he had been afraid, and now he was dead, and the wolves had judged him unworthy. Or perhaps they had simply been hungry. Perhaps there was no judgment at all, only the ancient mathematics of predator and prey. A sound behind me. I turned. The wolf was not white. She was gray, mottled with darker patches across her shoulders and face, and she was watching me from the tree line with amber eyes that reflected the snow's brightness. Perhaps 50 years in wolf terms, which meant she was old, experienced, patient, a survivor. We stared at each other. I did not run. Running would have been pointless, and besides, something in her gaze held me still. She was studying me the way the priests had studied me, looking for something. I raised my hand slowly and signed the only word that felt right. "Sister." The gray wolf tilted her head. Then, without aggression or hurry, she turned and walked back into the trees. I let out the breath I had been holding and realized my hands were shaking. That night, the temperature dropped so severely that I feared my small fire would not be enough. I huddled in my cave, wrapped in every layer I possessed, and still the cold crept into my bones like a living thing. I thought about the young man with his throat torn open. I thought about Grandmother Sepha alone in her cabin, waiting for news that might never come. I thought about my mother, walking away through the blizzard, leaving me to die. And then I thought about the white wolf and the ache in my chest that had been there since the dreams began. And I understood something I had not understood before. I was not afraid of dying out here. I was afraid of never knowing. Of returning to the village with the same questions I had carried my whole life, the same empty space where answers should be. That fear was greater than any wolf. The third day dawned gray and heavy with the promise of snow. I left my cave and walked deeper into the sacred grounds, following no path, guided only by the pull in my chest that had grown stronger with each passing hour. The white wolf was calling me. I could feel her now, not just as a distant presence, but as something immediate, something close. The trees thinned and then fell away entirely, revealing a vast frozen lake that stretched to the horizon. The ice was ancient, thick, scarred by decades of freezing and thawing. At its center there was an island, and on the island stood a structure I had never seen before, something between a temple and a den, built from stone and bone and the remains of creatures I could not identify. And standing at the edge of the lake, waiting for me, was the white wolf. She was exactly as she had been in my dreams, enormous, luminous, her pale blue eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made the air feel heavier. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The wind died. The world grew still. Then she turned and began walking across the ice toward the island. I followed. The temple, if that was what it was, had been abandoned for a long time. The stones were cracked, the bones yellowed with age, and snow had piled in drifts against the entrance. But there were signs that it had once been tended. Carvings on the walls depicting scenes I could not quite understand. Wolves and humans intertwined in ways that seemed impossible. The white wolf waited inside, in a chamber at the heart of the structure. She lay on a raised platform covered in furs that had long since rotted to dust, and when I entered, she raised her head and watched me approach. I am dreaming, I thought. This is another dream, and I will wake in my cave with tears on my face. But the cold was too real, the stone beneath my feet too solid. This was happening. Whatever this was, it was real. I knelt before her. My hands moved, signing words without thought. I came to find answers. I came to understand why I am alive. I came to know who I am. The white wolf rose. She stepped down from the platform and crossed the space between us until her massive head was level with mine. Her breath was warm against my face, carrying a scent of snow and pine and something older, something that reminded me of the way Grandmother Sifa's cabin smelled after a ritual, when the incense and the herbs mingled into a fragrance that was not quite of this world. And then I heard her voice, not in my ears, but somewhere deeper, in the place where the ache had lived for so long. "You are my daughter," she said, "not of my body, but of my spirit. Your mother brought you to me on the longest night, and she asked me to take you, to raise you, to make you one of us. But you were too human, too fragile. So I gave you to the old woman instead, and I watched you grow from afar, and I waited for the day you would be strong enough to return." Tears were streaming down my face now, freezing almost as quickly as they fell. I did not understand everything she was saying, but I understood enough. My mother had not abandoned me. She had given me to the wolves, not to die, but to be saved. And the wolves had saved me. They had fed me, kept me warm, and then surrendered me to the one human who could raise me when they could not. Why? I signed. "Why did she bring me to you?" "Because she was dying," the white wolf said, "and because she knew what you were, what you could become. And what am I?" The wolf pressed her forehead to mine, and in that moment, I felt everything she was. The centuries of memory, the weight of being the last of her kind, the loneliness that had driven her to accept a human child as her own. She was ancient. She was tired. She was waiting for someone to take her place. "You are the bridge," she said. "The one who walks between worlds, human enough to understand them, wolf enough to understand us. I have waited so long for you to come home. The priests found us at sunset. There were 4 of them, led by Father Halvard himself, and they came across the ice with weapons drawn and fury in their colorless eyes. They had followed my tracks, or perhaps they had always known where I would end up. Perhaps this was the judgment they had been waiting for since the moment I registered for the trials. "Abomination," Father Halvard said, his voice cracking with cold and anger. "We should have killed you when you first arrived. The wolf-touched are not meant to exist. They are a corruption of the natural order." The white wolf stepped in front of me, her hackles rising, a growl building in her throat. But she was old, far older than any creature had a right to be, and the priests had spears tipped with silver that gleamed in the fading light. I grabbed her fur, trying to pull her back, trying to tell her with my hands and my eyes that she could not fight them, that they would kill her, that I could not bear to lose her now that I had finally found her. But she shook me off with gentle firmness and continued forward, placing herself between me and the men who wanted me dead. Father Halvard raised his spear, and then the wolves came. They emerged from the trees, From the shadows, from the spaces between snowflakes, gray wolves, black wolves, wolves the color of rust and amber and midnight, dozens of them, more than I had ever seen in one place. They did not attack the priests. They simply surrounded them, a living wall of fur and teeth and gleaming eyes, and in their silence was a warning more eloquent than any words. Father Halvard lowered his spear. His face had gone the color of old ash. "You cannot protect her forever," he said to the white wolf. "She is human. She will age and die, and when she is gone, you will have nothing." The white wolf did not respond. She simply stared at him with those pale blue eyes until he turned and retreated across the ice, the other priests following, their footsteps quick and uncertain. The wall of wolves parted to let them pass, then closed again, watching until the priests had disappeared into the trees. When they were gone, the wolves turned to look at me, every one of them, and in their gazes I saw something I had never seen before in my life. Acceptance. The white wolf returned to my side. She pressed her head against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her neck and held her as the last light faded from the sky and the stars emerged, cold and brilliant, above the frozen lake. "You do not have to return to them," she said. "You can stay here, with us." I thought about Grandmother Sepha, waiting in her cabin. I thought about the village where I had never quite belonged. I thought about the life I had lived, always on the edges, always looking in. And then I thought about this place, this strange, ancient temple, this wolf who had loved me since before I could remember, this family I had never known I had. My hands moved, forming words I had never spoken before. I am already home. The sun rose on the 4th day, and I was still alive. I had passed the wolf trials. But the truth was, I had never been competing. I had been returning. All those years, all those dreams, all that longing for something I could not name, it had been leading me here, to this moment, to this choice. I remained on the island for another month, learning the ways of the wolf spirits, learning to communicate with them in ways that went beyond signs and gestures. The white wolf taught me the old stories, the ones the priests had tried to erase, about a time when humans and wolves were not enemies but partners, when the bridge between worlds was open and people like me were honored rather than feared. When I finally returned to the mainland, the wolves came with me, not all of them, but enough. They walked beside me through the forest, and when we reached the edge of the village, they stopped and watched as I continued alone. Grandmother Sepha was waiting at the door of her cabin. She could not see me, but she knew I was there. "You found what you were looking for," she said. I took her hands in mine and pressed them to my face, letting her feel the tears that I had stopped trying to hide. Yes, I signed against her palms. I found my family. She smiled, and in her smile I saw everything she had always known. Everything she had kept secret until I was ready to discover it for myself. "Welcome home," she said. Both of them. I turned and looked at the wolves waiting at the forest's edge. They would not enter the village, not yet. The old fears ran too deep. But they would wait, as they had always waited, for the day when the bridge between worlds could be rebuilt, and I would be the one to rebuild it. Because that is what I am. Not human, not wolf, but something in between, something new, something ancient, a daughter of two worlds, finally whole, finally at peace, finally where I was always meant to be. The man in the hall had been wrong. Humans cannot survive the wolf trials, he had said. But I was never just human, and I did not merely survive. I came home.